Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to Comic Swag. Today we're going to be covering X-Men issues 117, which debuted in January of 1979, all the way up to issue 121, which was in May of 1979. So this one is called The Cyborg, this first story, and we're introduced to a new villain here. You see it says the saga of Professor Xavier. Where we last left off, the X-Men had just left the Savage Land and they got on this little canoe basically, and they're gonna go across the ocean, and the weather conditions got real rough. Started a big storm. They're kind of stranded there. They're really struggling with this. Luckily we have this large ship with a captain there that takes notice. Hey, there's a boat at sea, small boat, really struggling, and we need to help them because they're not gonna make it in these weather conditions. So they go and they get all the X-Men on board the larger, safer ship. So the captain introduces himself as Captain Hama, and Cyclops gives his thanks that they're very grateful. They were obviously in a rough spot at the time, and he's kind of wondering, what are you guys doing out here in such a small boat, right? Like, it's too dangerous. Meanwhile, back in New York, Jean Grey, she still thinks the X-Men died, that Cyclops is dead, but really they're in the Savage Land. And Lilandra, at this time, who is dating Professor X, she also thinks they're dead. So she's talking with Jean Grey, and Jean Grey kind of wants to just leave the mansion. Like, what's the point of being here? All the X-Men are dead. I'm like the only one left, so why stay with Professor X, right? So she's saying her farewells, and Lilandra understands this, so she's gonna and she's kind of consoling Professor X, because in his opinion, they all died because of him, you know, because he sent them out there. Like, they're trying to fight for what is his dream, not theirs. And he's kind of feeling guilty about it. And he's looking at some of the old pictures when they were younger, right? Like, this is from like 3 years earlier when they were like new recruits. He still sees them as those children, those fresh recruits, right? In doing so, Professor X starts remembering about his youth. So he remembers he used to date Amora McTaggart. And when he used to date her, he remembers when they broke up, he was kind of traveling the world. And he starts reminiscing of when he met Storm. She was so young. She was like a little kid. And then he would meet her again in the future when she was much older, to get her to become an X-Men, basically. Back at this time, originally, Storm stole Professor X's wallet, which was pretty cool. And he chased her down and said, you know, how that's not cool, you know, it's not right. Kind of tried to guide her down the right path because she was so young. Now, what this did is, when he got her and she returned his wallet, he's a psyche, so he knew she was a mutant. And he got attacked psychically by somebody else, so he knew somebody put her up to it. Also a very powerful psyche mutant. So he decided to follow her around to see who this guy is that's sending her out to steal. Professor X sees the shady guy. He immediately knows this is the guy. And this guy sits down with a few ladies. Looks kind of like an important person. Maybe has, you know, some wealth. And Professor X sits down himself to have a cup of coffee. The whole time never really keeping his eyes off this guy. And this guy also not keeping his eyes off of Professor X. They both know their psyches. They both know they're mutants. They psychically challenge each other. So while it looks like they're both just sitting down, they're fighting with their minds. And I like what the artist did here. We show you the fight scene with their minds. It's you can use your imagination to be whatever you want. One becomes a big giant. The other guy becomes a gladiator with a sword and shield. It's like they're almost on another astral plane. And while they're fighting, since your imagination is unlimited, they could change to other creatures if they feel like it. So it's a very interesting fight scene, and it makes Professor Xavier look cool. Like, he's not just in a wheelchair all the time. Here he's actually in the middle of the action, right? Then he reveals himself to be the Shadow King. He will be a new bad that will reappear in X-Men issues in the future. He's getting the better of Professor Xavier here, but then Xavier makes a miraculous comeback. And while you see both sitting down, one falls to his death, and nobody knows why. So they kind of just think he maybe had a heart attack. And Professor X points out, this guy challenged me to my death, not knowing he was walking into his own death. So this was real nice right here. We took out a big bad. And in doing so, Storm was kind of just set free. She's not being controlled by this guy anymore. So once he's done telling Lilandra this story, he lets her know, after that showdown, I realized there's a lot of like evil mutants out there that take advantage of other people, use their powers for bad. And that's when I decided to start the school for gifted youngsters and create the X-Men team, basically, so that we could stop this type of stuff from happening and stop bad mutants from giving good mutants a bad name. So as Professor X is talking about this, he also brings up that back in the days he fought with this guy named Lucifer, this alien, and that's where he lost the use of his legs, and that's why he's in a wheelchair. So he's just really letting Lilandra know all about his life. And she says, since there's nothing left for you here, maybe you should come back to space with me, with the Share Empire. And he decides, there's nothing left on Earth for me, so yes, I will go with you, Lilandra. Go on to X-Men issue 118. Starts off where the X-Men are still on this boat where they were on the ocean. So they're finally hitting the coast, and they end up in Japan. So as they see Japan from afar, it's a city in ruins. You see all kinds of like a fire, a lot of smog and dark smoke, heavy clouds. So something is going down here. They're not sure what it is, but it's obviously nothing good. So the X-Men fly from the ship onto shore. So now they're in Japan. They're wondering what happened. They're all coughing and stuff because all the heavy smoke and smog, right? And then Wolverine picks up a newspaper here and he says, it seems like a earthquake hit. Cyclops brings to our attention as the reader that, hey, I didn't know Wolverine read Japanese. And Wolverine is like, hey, I spent some time in Japan before. Cyclops is sitting back and he doesn't think this was a natural disaster. He thinks it was like caused by somebody or something. Then we fly back to another scene where we're in space. We see Charles Xavier is now with Lilandra, living in the Share Empire. He got himself a cool new flying wheelchair because, you know, it's gotta sci-fi it up. We are in space now with like other technology. The X-Men go look around to kind of see what's going on with this whole fire. And they go into this place that's heavily guarded, almost like a military base. And Sunfire is expected to be there. And they do find him, so they think he would know more about this than them because he's a superhero that actually lives in Japan. So he would know more about the area. Sunfire is debating whether or not the X-Men should help because they are American and he doesn't want them in on Japanese business. But other people here disagree. They're like, we need all the help we can get. We can all work together. So they're having a disagreement about this, and Misty May happens to be in Japan at this time. So she calls Iron Fist to kind of let him know what's been going on. Wolverine is tired of the bickering, so he just wanders off and he's just looking around in the city, right? We are in Japan, and he bumps into some woman here. And she says, is someone there? And she's like, oh, who are you? And Wolverine is drawn to her. He just wants to escape the madness and he just sits down and chats with her. As Wolverine is chatting with her, another earthquake hits, and now we know it's definitely man-made. There's these guys in costumes, they're called the Mandroids, and they're causing these earthquakes. So they get into it with the X-Men, and the first person they attack is Sunfire. As the X-Men are getting into it with them, everybody's doing their share. Quick scuffle, and the Mastermind shows up. He says, I'm Moses Magnum, leader of the Magnum Force. So he looks like a very B-list character. Issue ends there. Magnus leaves, but before everything is said and done, he threatens Japan. He says Japan will sink. These earthquakes will keep coming and they will be stronger. So by midnight, he wants a certain amount of money. And the X-Men are trying to figure out what can they do. The Japanese government decided to work with the X-Men, with Sunfire, with Misty Knight. Everybody just has to work together to save this country. They go to this island that's believed to be the lair of Magnus. And Nightcrawler, using his stealth mode, he can disappear and appear in different areas. He sneaks in, kind of gets to see everything, lets the X-Men know where the villains are, where entrances are, and lets them know when it's safe to come in and they can plan an attack. Here, some of the X-Men are basically digging a tunnel underground. So they're gonna come in from from below. Once they come into the fortress, hell breaks loose. Colossus is the first to really see what Magnus has, and he's stronger than we thought. Like, he's not a pushover. He kind of manhandles Colossus, to be honest. Colossus almost falls off the surface of this place. Then Wolverine's the next one to take a hit. And yeah, he's a handful. And now to make things worse, we got some more of these mandroids to come help him. Now it's a more even odds, right? Like, he's with 3 people and the X-Men are about 5. We got basically a little Royal Rumble here. While everybody is fighting, Moses Magnum runs to this shaft, this laser drill. He's right in the center of it, and he's gonna drill downwards to the center of the earth. Banshee pulls a total power move. He uses his power to blow up half of this hill, and therefore cutting off the way for Moses Magnum to keep drilling down, and he kind of explodes this whole little cave they're in. Now that we are back on the surface, we have Misty Knight and the Japanese government. They're on airplanes, they're out by the ocean, and they're here to save the rest of the X-Men. So there was a happy ending to a very serious situation. It almost looked like this guy could have been a serious threat, but he got taken out pretty easily at the end of the day. So now the X-Men are out coming back home. They're happy to have Banshee back on the team. When they make their way back to the States, they bump into Jean Grey, who was leaving the X-Mansion because she thought all the X-Men were dead already. So to her surprise, they're all right here, and she's reunited with them. So this is like a real happy moment for her. She's like, oh, you guys are still alive. We head to the next issue, which is X-Men 120 of April. Love the cover here. You see some shadows looking through a window, and in the window you see a severe weather storm, and you see all the X-Men there. So who are these shadows? As we flip to the first page of the issue, it's the Alpha Flight. They have just made their second appearance here. Still going after Wolverine. So the X-Men are saying goodbye to Japan, saying goodbye to everybody. You see Wolverine saying his goodbyes to Mariko, the woman he just met and he developed a fondness for. She will become a recurring character in the X-Men mythos. So when they're flying back home to New York, there's a severe weather storm. They can't make it to New York, so they have to land in Canada. Once they're in Canada, they see one of the Alpha Flight members there asking for Wolverine. And you see Sasquatch. You just see his hands, but we know who he is. He's stopping the plane from moving once it's landing. He's basically the muscle of the Alpha Flight. And they're trying to get Wolverine. So now we know Alpha Flight has a shaman. He created all these weird weather so that the plane would have to land, because they know Wolverine is in it. So Storm, she creates her own storm, if you will. And now the Alpha Flight, they can't see where the X-Men are because all the wind and fog. And the X-Men get away while they recuperate and kind of plan for Alpha Flight next time, because they were totally caught off guard right now. Now we see the X-Men kind of unwinding, de-stressing. They hit the mall and Alpha Flight finds them, and they're capturing each character or each X-Men one by one. And when they try to get Storm, she didn't get put down so easily, right? She went out with a fight. She sees one of the Alpha Flight members and just lets him have it. She rips this big gust of wind. He goes flying through one wall, through another wall. In the mall, at the JCPenney, everybody's like, what the hell is going on? Storm came off like a total badass right here. We've really been building her up over the issues as being like a real powerhouse. She's one of the top members in my opinion. So she's one of the X-Men they couldn't capture. Storm gathers up the rest of the X-Men, and now they're going to look for Wolverine and Nightcrawler, two of the members that were captured by the Alpha Flight. And here we get introduced to all the characters on the team: Shaman, Aurora, Northstar, Vindicator, Snowbird, and of course Sasquatch. So now we're introduced to each character and their names. The two leaders, Vindicator and Cyclops, are having an argument. Cyclops wants his teammates back, even though he doesn't really like Wolverine sometimes, still an X-Men. So all hell breaks loose. Fight pops off between the two teams. Alpha Flight is basically the X-Men of Canada, if you will. And Fun fight scene here. We see the two powerhouses, Colossus and Sasquatch. And holy crap! Colossus finally wins a fight. Because he always loses every fight he's in. And Sasquatch is a lot bigger than him, but he managed to kind of get the upper hand here. Wolverine ends up being the voice of reason. I know everybody's acting out of pocket, completely out of character. So he says, look, you guys just want me, so leave the rest of the X-Men alone, and I'll go with you guys. Let's just stop this fiasco. Stop the needless violence, basically. I know. Wolverine said that. I know. So Wolverine decides to leave with Alpha Flight. They put him in a truck. He's in the back of the truck, and he escapes. And then he gets back on the plane with the X-Men. Issue over. Nice little issue there. If you guys like what you saw, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That will keep you notified on your feed next time the continuation to this video drops. Other than that, I'll check you guys out next time.